Commander Jake Morrison sat at his desk in the communications center of Terra Prime, Earth's largest space station. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His shift was almost over when the alarm started ringing. "Sir, we're getting something strange," called out Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez from her station. Her voice carried worry that made Jake stand up quickly. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to her console. "It's a distress signal, but not from any human ship. The frequency is completely different from anything we use." Maya's fingers moved fast across her controls, trying to make sense of the data flowing across her screen. Jake felt his heart beat faster. In his 10 years of service, he had never received a message from aliens. Sure, everyone knew about the Zephyrians. They were the tall, blue-skinned beings who had made contact with Earth 50 years ago. They had shared their amazing medical technology and saved millions of human lives during the Great Plague. But they had never, ever asked for help. "Can you clean up the signal?" Jake asked. "Working on it," Maya said, her face tight with concentration. "There's a lot of static, but I think I'm getting something." The speakers crackled to life, and voice came through. It was clearly not human, with a musical quality that made it sound like singing. But the words were desperate. "This is Zephyrian Council Ship Morning Star. We are under attack. Our worlds are burning. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. They came from the darkness between stars. They destroy everything. They take our people. We cannot fight them alone." The message repeated 3 times before cutting to static. Jake and Maya stared at each other in silence. "Get me Admiral Carter," Jake said quietly, "right now." 20 minutes later, Admiral Lisa Carter arrived at Terra Prime with her senior staff. She was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. Behind her came Captain Ryan Davis, a young officer who commanded the heavy cruiser UTS Defiance. "Play it again," Admiral Carter said without greeting anyone. They listened to the Zephyrian message 5 times. Each time, Jake noticed more details. The fear in the aliens' voice, the sound of explosions in the background, the way the message cut off suddenly, as if the ship had been destroyed. "How long ago did this come in?" Admiral Carter asked. "About an hour ago," Jake replied. "The signal took 3 days to reach us from the Kepler 442 system." Captain Davis spoke up. "Admiral, the Zephyrians have never asked for military help from anyone. They don't even have a real military. If they're calling for help, this must be really bad." Admiral Carter nodded slowly. "What do we know about who's attacking them?" "Very little," Jake admitted. "The message mentioned they came from the darkness between stars. That could mean they're from outside our local group of systems." "I want a full intelligence briefing in 2 hours," Admiral Carter said. "Contact the Solar Council. This is big enough that they need to know." As the Admiral left, Jake felt a cold worry in his stomach. The Zephyrians were peaceful people. They had never fought anyone. Their technology was amazing, but it was all focused on healing and growing things. If someone was attacking them, it meant there was a new threat in the galaxy. Over the next few hours, more pieces of the puzzle came together. Captain Davis took his ship to the edge of the solar system to scan for long-range signals. What he found made everyone's blood run cold. "There are no more signals coming from Zephyrian space," he reported to Admiral Carter. "Nothing at all. Either they've gone completely quiet, or they're all dead," the Admiral finished, but then something else came through. It was a different kind of signal, much stronger and clearer. It was in a language that Earth's computers had never heard before. The translation system worked for hours before producing anything useful. The message was short and terrifying. "The Corvin hegemony has claimed this system. All life forms will submit or be destroyed. We come next for the system called Soul. Prepare for integration. Jake felt his hands shake as he read the translation. They're coming for us next. Admiral Carter called an emergency meeting of the Solar Council. Representatives from Earth, Mars, Europa, and the asteroid colonies gathered in the Great Hall of Terra Prime. The debate was loud and angry. We can't get involved in alien wars, argued Counselor Ben Riley from Mars. We have our own people to protect. The Zephyrians saved millions of our people, countered Counselor Sue Patterson from Europa. We owe them. It doesn't matter what we owe them, said Counselor Chris Evans from the asteroid colonies. If these Corvin things are coming for us anyway, we need to fight them whether we help the Zephyrians or not. Admiral Carter stood up, and the room went quiet. The choice has been made for us. These Corvins have already decided to attack Earth. The only question is whether we wait for them to finish destroying our friends first, or whether we fight them now while we might still have allies. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth would send a fleet to help the Zephyrians. If any of them were still alive. As Jake watched the council members leave, he wondered what they were getting into. Earth had a strong military, but they had never fought aliens before. They had no idea what kind of weapons or tactics these Corvins used, but one thing was clear: the peaceful time was over. War was coming to the galaxy, and humanity would have to fight for survival. The next morning, Admiral Carter began giving orders to prepare the fleet. Jake stayed at his post, listening to the static from Zephyrian space and hoping they weren't too late to help. In the distance, he could see the shapes of human warships beginning to gather, their metal hulls gleaming in the light of the sun. The message had been clear: the Corvins were coming. But they probably didn't know what they were getting into when they decided to threaten Earth. They had never met humans before. That was about to change. 3 days after the Zephyrian distress signal, Captain Nicole Thompson was leading a patrol squadron near the edge of the solar system when her sensors picked up something that shouldn't be there. Contact bearing 270, called out. Her sensor operator, Sergeant Tony Williams. 3 ships, unknown design, moving toward the inner system. Nicole felt her pulse quicken. Are they broadcasting anything? Negative, Captain. They're just scanning us. Wait, ... Tony's voice changed. Captain, they're scanning us with some kind of deep probe. It's like they're trying to see inside our ships. All ships, battle formation, Nicole ordered into her communication system. This is Patrol Leader Thompson. We have first contact with unknown vessels. The 3 alien ships were unlike anything in human records. They were smooth and dark, shaped like giant insects with too many legs. As Nicole's squadron moved closer, the alien ships suddenly changed course and headed straight for them. They're accelerating fast, Tony reported. Faster than anything we've ever seen. A first alien ship opened fire without warning. Energy beams that glowed purple struck the hull of Nicole's ship, but the damage was surprisingly light. The human shields held, and the armor plating absorbed most of the impact. Return fire, Nicole ordered. The human ships responded with a barrage of kinetic rounds and plasma bursts. The alien ship that had fired first suddenly stopped moving. Its smooth hull cracked and split open, venting atmosphere into space. What just happened? Tony asked, staring at his readings. I think we just learned something important, Nicole said grimly. Their weapons are designed for something else, and our weapons work better than they expected. The other 2 alien ships immediately turned and fled at maximum speed. Nicole's ships chased them to the edge of the system, but the aliens were faster and escaped. Back at Terra Prime, Admiral Carter studied the battle reports with growing interest. The alien technology was clearly advanced, but it seemed designed for fighting very different enemies. Their weapons are meant for targets with energy-based defenses, explained Dr. Frank Mitchell, the fleet's chief technology officer. They probably expected us to have shields made of pure energy, like most advanced species use. Our physical armor confused their systems. What about their ship design? Admiral Carter asked. Built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower. Against stationary targets, Dr. Mitchell replied, but not very good at maneuvering or adapting to unexpected tactics. The real revelation came when the fleet's intelligence division finished analyzing the captured data from the alien ships. Computers. What they found changed everything humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Commander Danny Clark, head of Fleet Intelligence, presented his findings to Admiral Carter and her senior staff. His face was pale as he began to speak. According to the alien records, Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world by the Galactic Council, he said. That's the highest danger rating possible. Most species consider our planet completely uninhabitable. What makes it so dangerous? Asked Captain Davis. Everything, Danny replied. The gravity is too high. The atmosphere is too reactive. The weather is too violent. The native life forms are too aggressive. According to these records, most intelligent species evolve on worlds that are much safer and more stable than Earth. Admiral. Carter leaned forward. Go on. The Corvan hegemony has conquered 17 different species over the past 2 centuries, Danny continued. Every single one of them evolved on what they call garden worlds, planets with gentle climates, weak gravity, and peaceful ecosystems. They've never encountered a species that evolved on a world where everything is constantly trying to kill them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Captain Davis was the first to speak. You're saying we're naturally adapted for warfare because Earth is so dangerous? More than that, Danny said. According to the alien data, humans are the only known species that evolved from persistence hunters. Most intelligent species evolved from prey animals or from creatures that lived in safe environments. We're the only ones who evolved from predators. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Baker, the fleet's Marine commander, spoke up. That explains why their battle tactics seem so strange. They're used to fighting creatures that run away or hide when threatened. But humans don't run, added Master Sergeant Kelly Brooks. We fight back. We adapt. We keep coming until the threat is eliminated. Admiral Carter stood up and began pacing. This changes our entire strategy. If we're really that different from other species, we need to use it to our advantage. Over the next few days, the fleet's analysis of the alien technology revealed more surprising facts. The Corvan hegemony's weapons were incredibly advanced, but they were designed to deal with species that fought in very predictable ways. Their ships were built to intimidate and overwhelm, not to engage in close combat. They expect their enemies to surrender quickly, explained Dr. Mitchell. Most species apparently give up after losing a few ships. The Corvans have never had to fight a prolonged war. What about their ground forces? Admiral Carter asked. Lieutenant. Colonel Baker had studied the captured data about Corvan infantry tactics. They use fear and superior numbers to break enemy morale. Their weapons are designed to cause maximum terror, not necessarily maximum damage. They expect their enemies to panic and run. But humans don't panic the same way, Master Sergeant. Brooks added, we get angry. We fight harder when we're threatened. The most shocking revelation came from the alien ship's navigation records. The Corvans had detailed maps of the galaxy, showing the locations of dozens of intelligent species. Every single one was marked as conquered or scheduled for integration, except for one small cluster of systems marked in red with a symbol that the computers translated as extreme danger, avoid. Earth was right in the center of that cluster. They've been avoiding us, Admiral Carter realized. For 2 centuries, They've been conquering the galaxy, but they've been going around our section of space. Until now, Captain Davis said grimly. Something made them change their minds. The answer came from deeper analysis of the alien records. The Corvins had finally decided to attack Earth because they were running out of easy targets. The peaceful species were all conquered or destroyed. The only remaining sources of resources and new technology were the systems they had been avoiding. They think we're just another species they haven't met yet, Commander Clark explained. They don't realize we're different. They're expecting. Used to be like all the others, peaceful, civilized, and easily defeated. Admiral Carter smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Then we're going to give them a very unpleasant surprise. The fleet began preparing for war with new knowledge of their advantages. Human ships were redesigned to emphasize their strengths, thick armor, powerful weapons, and the ability to take massive damage and keep fighting. Human tactics were revised to take advantage of their natural aggression and adaptability. Most importantly, the human military began training for something no other species had ever done successfully, fighting the Corvin hegemony and winning Dot as the preparations continued. Word of the alien threat spread through the human colonies. But instead of panic, the response was anger. The Corvins had made a critical error in judgment. They had threatened Earth. And humans, unlike the other species, they had conquered, didn't respond to threats by surrendering. They responded by preparing for war. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the UTS Vengeance, watching as the largest fleet in human history gathered in the space around Earth. Ships came from every human colony, every military base, and every defense station. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. "Final count, Admiral," reported her communications officer, Corporal Sam Peterson. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, 4 assault carriers, and 230 fighter craft. Plus the Vengeance, of course. Carter nodded. The Vengeance was humanity's only dreadnought, a massive ship that had been built in secret over the past decade. It was twice the size of any other human vessel, bristling with weapons and armor that had never been tested in real combat. "What's the status on the Marine complement?" she asked. Lieutenant Colonel Baker stepped forward. 40,000 Marines ready for deployment, Admiral. Every one of them has been briefed on what we know about Corvin tactics. Carter looked out at the assembled fleet. Each ship represented years of human engineering and thousands of hours of training. But more than that, each ship carried people who had volunteered to fight for their species and their allies. Captain Frank Mitchell approached from the tactical station. "Admiral, we're getting interesting reports from our scout ships. The Corvins seem to be having trouble understanding our fleet composition." "What kind of trouble?" Carter asked. "They keep scanning us and then scanning us again, like they can't believe what they're seeing," Mitchell explained. "Our ships don't match any pattern in their databases. They're probably wondering why we have so many small, heavily armed vessels instead of a few large command ships." Captain Davis, who had been promoted to Fleet Tactical Commander, joined the conversation. "That's because they've never fought anyone who uses our kind of tactics. Most species build big ships with powerful shields and fight at long range. We build tough ships that can take damage and get in close." The difference in philosophy was clear when Carter looked at the alien ship designs they had captured. Corvin vessels were elegant and sophisticated, with smooth hulls and advanced energy systems. Human ships looked like flying fortresses, with thick armor plating and redundant systems designed to keep fighting even when badly damaged. "Have we heard anything more from Zephyrian space?" Carter asked. Commander Clark, monitoring intelligence reports, shook his head. "Still nothing, Admiral. Either they're all dead or they're hiding very well." Carter felt a cold anger in her chest. The Zephyrians had been Earth's first alien friends. They had shared their medical technology freely, asking for nothing in return except friendship. If the Corvins had destroyed them, there would be a price to pay. "Fleet status report," she called out. The reports came in quickly. Every ship was ready for combat. The Marines were loaded into their assault craft. The fighter pilots were strapped into their cockpits. The fleet supply ships were loaded with enough ammunition and fuel for a major campaign. But the most important preparations were the ones that couldn't be seen. Every human in the fleet had been briefed on the Corvin threat. They knew what had happened to the 17 species that had been conquered. They knew that Earth was next on the list. More importantly, they knew that humans were different. They were the products of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. They were the descendants of creatures who had survived ice, ages, volcanic explosions, plagues, and natural disasters that would have wiped out most species. Commander Sue Patterson, leading the fighter wing from the carrier UTS Rampage, checked in with her pilots. "All wings report ready for deployment," she announced over the fleet communication system. Her pilots included some of the best in human space. Major Chris Evans had trained in the storms of Jupiter's upper atmosphere. Captain Ben Riley had learned to fly in the dust storms of Mars. Lieutenant Amy Foster had practiced combat maneuvers in the asteroid fields, dodging chunks of rock moving at thousands of kilometers per hour. Each pilot brought skills that had been developed in Earth's most dangerous environments. They were used to fighting in conditions that would terrify most species. The vacuum of space, with its radiation and debris, was just another hostile environment to master. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Corvin fleet," announced Corporal Peterson. "They're demanding that we surrender and prepare for integration into their collective." Carter almost smiled. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared was disturbing. The Corvin commander looked like a cross between an insect and a machine, with multiple eyes and limbs that moved in unnatural ways. When it spoke, its voice was flat and emotionless. "Inhabitants of the system designated Sol 3, you will cease your military preparations and submit to integration. Resistance will result in the destruction of your species. You have 1 solar rotation to comply." The transmission ended. Carter looked around the bridge at her officers. Every face showed the same expression. Cold determination. Tactical analysis? She asked. Captain Davis consulted his displays. "Their fleet is about twice the size of ours, but their ships are designed for fighting at long range against stationary targets. If we can get in close, our advantages in armor and firepower should give us the edge." "What about their ground forces?" asked Lieutenant Colonel Baker. "Unknown," Davis admitted. "But based on what we've seen, they probably expect their enemies to surrender before it comes to ground combat. They might not be prepared for a real fight." Carter made her decision. "We're not waiting for them to attack Earth. We're going to hit them while they're still organizing their forces." The fleet began to move. First the scout ships, racing ahead to gather intelligence. Then the main battle. Fleet accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. Finally, the supply ships and support vessels. Following at a safe distance dot as the Vengeance picked up speed, Carter thought about the message they were sending. For 2 centuries, the Corvins had been the dominant military force in the galaxy. They had conquered every species they encountered. They had never faced serious resistance. That was about to change. The human fleet wasn't just going to fight the Corvins. They were going to show the entire galaxy that the age of easy conquest was over. There was a new power in space, and it came from a world where survival meant fighting every day. "Admiral, we're approaching the edge of the system," reported the navigation officer. "The Corvin fleet is holding position about 12 light minutes out." Carter stood up and walked to the front of the bridge. Through the armored windows, she could see the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, the Corvins were waiting, confident in their superiority. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," she announced over the fleet communication system. "We're going to show these creatures what happens when they threaten our friends and our home. Remember, We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species that wants to live free." The response came back from 200 ships and 50,000 humans. For Earth and freedom. The fleet accelerated toward the waiting enemy, carrying with them the hopes of a species that had never learned to surrender. The Corvins had made a critical error. They had threatened humanity. Now they were going to learn why that was a mistake. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and what they saw made every person aboard feel sick with anger. 3 of the 7 beautiful worlds that had once been home to the peaceful Zephyrians were now dead rocks, their surfaces stripped bare by Corvin mining equipment. "Dear God," whispered Captain Davis as the images came in on the main screen. "What did they do to them?" "They strip-mined entire planets," reported Commander Clark, his voice tight with rage. "The Corvins don't just conquer worlds. They consume them completely." Admiral Carter studied the tactical display. The Corvin fleet was massive. Over 400 ships surrounding Zephyria Prime. The planet itself was under siege, with huge mining platforms in orbit and swarms of smaller ships attacking the surface. "Any signs of Zephyrian resistance?" she asked. "Some," replied Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, now serving as the fleet's communication officer. "I'm picking up scattered signals from the surface. They're still fighting, but they're losing badly." Carter felt a surge of relief. The Zephyrians were still alive, at least some of them. But they wouldn't be for long if the human fleet didn't act fast. "Fleet composition analysis," she ordered. Captain Mitchell consulted his sensors. "The Corvin fleet is set up for orbital bombardment and resource extraction. Most of their ships are focused on the planet. They've got maybe 50 ships on patrol duty. They're not expecting an attack," observed Captain Davis. "They think they've already won." Carter made a decision that would be remembered for centuries. Instead of engaging the Corvin fleet in a traditional space battle, she chose to do something that no species had ever attempted: a direct assault on their command structure. "All ships, listen carefully," she announced over the fleet communication system. "We're going to punch straight through their perimeter and hit their command ship. Once we cut the head off the snake, the rest of their fleet will be confused and disorganized." The human fleet formed up in a wedge formation, with the Vengeance at the point and the heavy cruisers forming the sides. The destroyers and fighters spread out to provide cover and attack targets of opportunity. The Corvin patrol ships detected the human fleet when they were still an hour away from the planet. The aliens immediately moved to intercept, but they made a critical error. They approached in a standard formation, expecting the humans to do the same. Instead, the human fleet split into multiple groups and attacked from different directions. At once, the Corvin ships, designed to fight in coordinated formations, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the chaos. Captain Nicole Thompson, now commanding the destroyer UTS Defiance, led the first attack group straight into the Corvin line. Her ship's armor was scarred and blackened from previous battles, but it held firm as purple energy beams struck the hull. "All weapons fire at will," she ordered. The human ships responded with a devastating barrage of kinetic rounds and plasma bursts. The Corvin ships, built for intimidation rather than durability, began to break apart under the assault. But the real shock came when the human Marines began their boarding operations. Lieutenant Colonel Baker led the first wave, using small assault craft to ram directly into the hulls of damaged Corvin ships. The Corvin crew members had never experienced anything like human boarding tactics. They expected their enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers. Instead, they found themselves fighting creatures that became more dangerous when cornered. "These humans are insane," reported a Corvin commander, his message intercepted by human intelligence. "They fight with no regard for their own safety. They use their own bodies as weapons." Master Sergeant Kelly Brooks, leading a Marine squad through the corridors of a Koran ship, encountered something that made her blood run cold. The ship was full of prisoners, members of conquered species who had been turned into slaves or worse. "Admiral, you need to see this," she reported over the communication system. "These creatures aren't just conquerors. They're something else entirely." The discovery that the Corvins were using captured beings as living components in their ships sent a wave of fury through the human fleet. The attack became more vicious as word spread about what the aliens were really doing to their victims. Captain Davis, leading the assault on the main Corvin command ship, found himself face to face with a Corvin hive commander. The creature was 3 times the size of a human, with multiple arms and a body that seemed to be part machine. "You cannot defeat us," the creature said in perfect English. "We are the inevitable future. We have conquered 17 species. You will be the 18th. Davis raised his weapon. "You made one mistake. You threatened our friends." The battle for the command ship lasted 3 hours. The Corvins fought with desperate fury, but they were not prepared for the kind of warfare that humans brought to them. Human soldiers fought in small groups, adapting to changing situations and showing individual initiative that the hive mind couldn't understand. The turning point came when Sergeant Tony Williams, working with a group of rescued Zephyrian technicians, discovered a weakness in the Corvin hive mind. The collective consciousness that controlled their fleet couldn't process the concept of sacrifice for others. "They literally cannot understand why we're risking our lives for the Zephyrians," he reported to Admiral Carter. "It's causing errors in their command system." Carter immediately ordered all ships to broadcast messages about their mission to save the Zephyrians. The effect on the Corvin fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ships began to malfunction as their hive mind tried to process the impossible idea of one species fighting to save another. The battle turned into a rout. Corvin ships that had been coordinating perfectly began to collide with each other. Their weapons stopped firing in organized patterns. Some ships simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by the breakdown in their collective consciousness. Captain Patterson, leading her fighter wing in an attack on the Corvin mining platforms, watched in amazement as entire squadrons of enemy fighters simply shut down in mid-flight. "What's happening to them?" asked Major Evans over the communication system. "They're having a nervous breakdown," Patterson replied. "Their whole system is based on the idea that everyone fights only for themselves. We've broken their logic." The final phase of the battle was more like a rescue operation than a fight. Human ships moved through the wreckage of the Corvin fleet, searching for survivors and prisoners. They found thousands of beings from dozens of species, all of them victims of Corvin conquest. The Zephyrians were among the survivors, though their numbers were tragically small. Of the billions who had lived on their 7 worlds, only a few 100,000 remained. Admiral Carter received a message from the Zephyrian Council leader, one of the few high-ranking officials who had survived the invasion. "We owe you our lives," the alien said, his musical voice heavy with grief and gratitude. "But why? Why did you risk everything to save us?" Carter thought about the question for a moment. "Because that's what friends do," she replied simply. The victory at Zephyria Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in Corvin history, an entire invasion fleet had been not just defeated, but completely destroyed. The few Corvin ships that escaped carried with them data that would terrify their collective consciousness. But the real impact was on the other species of the galaxy. Word spread quickly that there was a new power in space, one that didn't conquer but protected. The age of easy conquest was over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were here to stay. 6 months after the Battle of Zephyria Prime, Fleet Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, a place where humans had never been welcome before. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. all of them looking at her with a mixture of fear and hope. The Galactic Council had existed for over 1,000 years, but it had always been powerless to stop aggressive species like the Corvins. Now, for the first time, they had someone who could actually fight back. The Terran Federation accepts the Council's invitation to join as a permanent member, Carter announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. But we have conditions. A murmur went through the assembled aliens. No species had ever made demands of the Galactic Council before. First, we will establish joint defense agreements with any peaceful species that requests our protection. Second, we will share our military technology and tactics with allied species. Third, we will actively hunt down and destroy any force that threatens peaceful civilizations. The council chairman, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, leaned forward. You speak of hunting down threats. Do you mean the Corvins? The Corvins are just the beginning, Carter replied. Our intelligence reports show at least 6 other aggressive species that have been expanding through conquest. They've all been avoiding this region of space because they thought we were too dangerous to attack. They were right. Back on Earth, the victory at Zephyria Prime had transformed human society. The revelation that Earth was a death world had initially shocked people, but it quickly became a source of pride. Humans were unique in the galaxy, and that uniqueness made them powerful. Captain Ryan Davis, now promoted to Admiral and Commander of the new Terran Defense Force, oversaw the construction of 12 new military academies. Their mission was to train other species in what humans called Death World tactics. The basic principle is simple, he explained to a class of young officers from 6 different species. Most galactic warfare is based on the idea that battles are won by superior technology and overwhelming force. But Deathworld tactics are based on adaptation, persistence, and the willingness to take risks. The students, including several rescued Zephyrians, listened intently. They were learning to think like predators instead of prey, to see challenges as opportunities instead of threats. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Baker, now commanding the Galactic Marine Corps, was training mixed units of humans and aliens. The results were impressive. Species that had been conquered easily by the Corvins were now becoming formidable fighters. The key is understanding that every species has strengths, he explained to Master Sergeant Kelly Brooks, who was helping train a unit of former Corvin prisoners. Humans are good at adapting and fighting in chaos. Zephyrians are excellent at coordination and healing. The rock people from Titan Prime are nearly indestructible. When you combine all these abilities, you get something that no single species can match. The new military doctrine was being tested in the field. Admiral Nicole Thompson, commanding a joint human-alien fleet, had just completed a successful operation against a Corvin remnant force that had been raiding peaceful colonies. The enemy is adapting to our tactics, she reported to Fleet Admiral Carter. They're trying to develop new strategies to counter our advantages. Good, Carter replied. That means they're learning to fear us. Fear will make them more cautious, and caution will give us more time to prepare. The real test came when the hegemony of swords, another aggressive species, decided to attack a cluster of peaceful worlds near the edge of human space. Unlike the Corvins, the swords were experienced warriors who had been conquering other species for centuries. Captain Frank Mitchell, now commanding the heavy cruiser UTS Retribution, led the first response force. His crew included members of 12 different species, all of them trained in Deathworld tactics. The battle was brutal. The swords were skilled fighters with advanced weapons and tactics. But they made the same mistake as the Corvins. They expected their enemies to fight like civilized beings. They're trying to force us into a traditional battle line, reported Commander Sue Patterson, leading the fighter wing. Should we comply? Negative, Mitchell replied. Break formation and attack from all directions. Make them fight the kind of battle they're not prepared for. The human-led fleet scattered across the battlefield, forcing the swords to fight dozens of separate engagements at once. The alien commanders, trained in formal warfare, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the chaos. The victory sent another message to the galaxy. The humans and their allies were not just lucky. They were developing a new form of warfare that could defeat any traditional military force. But the most important development was happening on the diplomatic front. Species that had been hiding from aggressive neighbors for centuries were now coming forward to ask for human protection. Commander Danny Clark, now head of Galactic Intelligence, presented his latest findings to Fleet Admiral Carter. We've identified 43 peaceful species that have been hiding from aggressive neighbors. They're all requesting protection under the Terran Defense Doctrine. Carter studied the star maps showing the locations of these hidden civilizations. Some had been in hiding for hundreds of years, afraid to develop advanced technology that might attract the attention of conquering species. What about the aggressive species? She asked. 7 major powers, including the Corvins and the Swords. Clark replied. But here's the interesting part. They're all starting to avoid systems under human protection. Word is spreading that attacking our allies means fighting us. The strategy was working. For the first time in galactic history, aggressive species were being contained rather than allowed to expand freely. The balance of power was shifting toward the peaceful civilizations. Captain Ben Riley, commanding the patrol ship UTS Guardian, encountered this new reality during a routine mission to escort Zephyrian colony ships to a new world. His sensors detected a Corvin scouting force approaching the convoy. Corvin vessels, this is Captain Riley of the Terran Defense Force. He broadcast on all frequencies. You are approaching ships under our protection. Change course immediately or face the consequences. The response was immediate. The Corvin. Ships turned away without firing a shot. They had learned what happened to forces that attacked human allies. I never thought I'd see the day when Corvins would retreat from a single human ship, commented his Zephyrian liaison officer. Your reputation has become a weapon more powerful than your guns. Riley nodded. The psychological impact of human victories was as important as the military victories themselves. The galaxy was learning that humans didn't just win battles. They won them decisively and at great cost to their enemies. The most significant development came when the Galactic Council voted to adopt the Deathworld Doctrine as official policy. For the first time in its history, the Council had both the will and the means to protect peaceful species from aggressive neighbors. Fleet Admiral Carter found herself at the center of a transformation that would reshape the galaxy. Standing on the bridge of the UTS Vengeance, now serving as the flagship of the Galactic Defense Force, she watched as ships from dozens of species practiced the complex maneuvers that made Deathworld tactics so effective. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth, announced Corporal Sam Peterson, still serving as her communications officer after all these years. The message was from the President of Earth, but it wasn't what Carter expected. Admiral, we're getting reports of a new threat in the Andromeda Galaxy. Something called the Machine Collective has started sending probe ships toward our galaxy. The Galactic Council is requesting that you take a joint fleet to investigate. Carter felt a familiar mixture of excitement and concern. Just when they had started to bring peace to their own galaxy, a new threat was emerging from beyond the stars. Prepare the fleet for extended operations, she ordered, and send a message to all allied species. We're going to need everyone for this one. As the great ships began to gather once again, Carter reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate message from the Zephyrians. Humanity had gone from being an unknown species on the edge of space to being the military backbone of galactic civilization. But more than that, they had shown the galaxy that peaceful species didn't have to live in fear. With the right tactics, and the will to fight, even the most aggressive enemies could be defeated. The age of easy conquest was over. The Deathworlders had taken their place as the guardians of the galaxy, and they were ready for whatever threats might come from the darkness between the stars. Admiral Davis, now commanding the Home Defense Fleet, watched from Earth as Carter's expedition fleet departed for the edge of the galaxy. "Think they'll find trouble out there?" he asked his aide. "Sir, they're humans leading a fleet of species that have learned to fight like humans," came the reply. "If there's trouble out there, I almost feel sorry for it." Carter's final transmission. As the fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel was simple. "This is Fleet Admiral Carter to all peaceful species. The Terran Defense Force is expanding operations to protect our galaxy from external threats. Any species or collective that thinks they can conquer our homes will learn the same lesson.